Hello, everybody. Welcome back to an episode of Podcast of Bonita that you most certainly didn't ask for, but you're going to get it anyway. My name is Shirley.
And I'm Rachel.
And today we're going to be talking about our headcanons, a little bit more of an official video for our headcanons about our main four's future.
Yeah, so we have kind of talked about this a lot in separate videos, so we just decided to put it all in one place for you guys.
And a little bit more structured. Like a little, it's not quite scripted because nothing we ever really do is scripted at all. But we kind of, a lot of the headcanons we put forth earlier were kind of spur of the moment questions. So this time we actually sat down and thought of like a pretty regular timeline for each of the main four. Rachel and I have kind of like different headcanons, but for the most part they follow a similar story. So I guess Rachel's gonna start us off with it.
Okay, and I will have to prove Shirley wrong because I'm just gonna read from my script that I have here.
Wow, way to call me out. Okay, well, I guess I'm unscripted because I can improvise. Not well, but I can.
Okay, here's what I have for Stan, and it's very long and thorough.
Of course, because Stan is your favorite.
That's right. Okay, so here we go. Stan continues to struggle with alcoholism in his adolescence, which drives him and Wendy apart. In high school, Stan is the star quarterback for a few years until he is caught drinking and kicked off the team. This causes him to befriend the goth kids again, and this time he fits in much better due to his depression and addiction to drugs and alcohol. He drifts from Kyle and becomes close with Kenny because of their similarly unstable home lives and their strong interest in romance and sex at the time. However, he and Kyle do reconnect later in life. After high school, Stan goes to the University of Denver and double majors in art history and marketing. His time away from home and bad influences allows him to think more practically, and he quits drinking. During trips home in college, Stan volunteers at Big Al's pet sanctuary and has a strong friendship/mentorship with Big Al. Stan sees Al as a father figure and sort of develops a crush on him, but doesn't realize this at the time because he is back to pursuing Wendy. After college, Stan starts dating Wendy again and moves to New York to be with her. They marry after she finishes law school and have 2 daughters together. However, their marriage ultimately fails because of incompatibility and their different goals in life. In his 40s or 50s, Stan moves back to South Park to take care of his aging mother and reconnects with many of his old friends, including Kenny, Gary, and the goth kids. Big Al dies a few years later and leaves Stan ownership of the pet sanctuary. After his divorce, Stan is able to explore his sexuality and identifies as bisexual. He starts seeing Pete, one of the goth kids, but realizes he is not a healthy influence and has to take a step back, although he remains friends with Pete and the goth kids and is always available if they need him. This experience allows him to forgive Kyle, who he resented for a long time because he felt Kyle abandoned him during his teen years when he needed him the most. The two reconnect and become good friends again. In his 60s, Stan eventually settles down with Gary, who helps him run the pet sanctuary, and volunteers with him to coach football. Stan remains in South Park for the remainder of his days, where his daughters and grandchildren often visit. Like all Marshmen, he lives well into his hundreds, but he ages gracefully and never once asks any of his grandkids to murder him. The end.
I love that. We don't be surprised if a couple of these are angsty and, a little bit sad, but we ultimately tried to give every single character the happy ending that they deserved. And my storyline for Stan is pretty similar. Like you'll see with all 4 of these characters, Rachel and I have really similar beats to each character's life. Just some of the details are different. For me, again, I like the idea of Stan struggling with alcoholism in his teens, because that issue technically hasn't really been resolved in the show at all. And it's unfortunate, but with Stan's, family history and his issues with depression, it isn't unlikely for him to develop this problem So in my world, Stan develops a hard drinking problem as a high schooler. Again, because we have to follow the rules of fandom, of course. He is the star quarterback, because that's just what Stan is. And, he kind of is seen as a little bit of the life of the party on the exterior, but inside he's a little bit, a bit depressed. So he kind of hides this self from the rest of the world and just puts on this mask of being fun and the party goer for his high school career. And his life really takes a downturn when Kyle and Wendy kind of separate from his life. Kyle has a really huge test coming up that's, part of his college admission and everything. And the night before that, Stan calls him completely drunk, almost about to wreck his car. And Kyle has to pick him up super, super late at night and nearly misses his test the next morning because of him helping Stan. So Kyle officially just kind of friend breaks up with Stan. Wendy does the same. And Stan continues to, drift apart from those two and continues to drink heavier, where he is accepted. I think he would get a football scholarship to a local community college. And he would, get a minor degree and everything. And, he would continue his party life in college. And he does fine. He does fine in college, but he still has a lot of problems with drinking. And it isn't until when he's about to graduate, he and Randy go for a drink to celebrate, even though he's been kind of distant from his parents, who are divorced at this point. He decides, I'll go ahead and have this drink with my dad. And while he's there, he has this revelation because Randy says, I'm so proud of you. You're a chip off the old block. You're just like I was at your age. And Stan has this come to Jesus moment where he realizes he is turning into his father, and that's his worst nightmare. So that night, after a lot of tears and frustration, he calls Kyle. And so, they reconnect, and Kyle actually sponsors Stan's road to recovery. So Stan gets clean, and he also reconnects with Wendy. I also, it was too good of an idea to pass up. I also love the idea of Stan working at Big Gay Al's animal sanctuary. And at first he just works there and, works like part-time and everything and makes a couple of bucks. He rekindles with Wendy. I also believe that they would marry, have 2 daughters. And Stan is very involved in their lives. And I do find that Wendy and Stan would divorce, not because, but I think they'd be very civil about. I'd find them to be really civil. They'd be really good co-parenters, and I would love the idea for Stan to get a vet tech license and kind of change the. He inherits Big Gay Al Sanctuary and everything once Big Gay Al retires, and he turns it almost into a sanctuary / hospital where he employs vets, and he becomes really successful. He's back in South Park as an older adult, but no longer is afraid of that environment. He kind of embraces it, and I don't really have him set up with anybody, but I like the idea of him exploring his sexuality, but there's nobody permanent in my headcanon or anything, but I know he has a very civil relationship with Wendy when they co-parent, and he's still super close friends with Kyle until the end. And that's it.
Yeah, I mean, we decided to just do our own separate headcanons because they are, like, very similar but, like, different enough that we can just talk about our own personal wishes for this character. And what I like about mine specifically is that, like, the first half of Stan's life, like, the first 50 years, it's him just trying to figure shit out. It's like, first he has this struggle with alcoholism, and he loses his people in his life, and then he gets them back, and then he becomes a parent, and he realizes he misses South Park, and he has to care for his mother, and the first 50 years is him just figuring shit out and building relationships with people, and it isn't until like the latter of his life that he kind of gets what he wants, gets it, and then lives happily. So I love that, because especially nowadays there's such a pressure for people to have like their whole lives put together by like 25 or 30. And that's not realistic. Like, you can not like mess shit up, but you can like try different stuff for decades until it works out, because you have so much life ahead of you.
I agree 100%, and I think Stan is like the perfect vessel to explore that kind of struggle and everything of not knowing what to do, but yet at the same time having everybody expect you to know what to do. It's Stan, especially, with his character. He's very emotionally driven by things. It sometimes comes at a fault. Very often it comes at a fault. He's so emotionally driven that it's hard for him to separate himself from personal situations, and he ends up getting hurt afterwards. And as cynical as it is, with the alcoholism and everything that we have, I wouldn't say it would be out of character or anything. In fact, I think it's kind of a really deep idea to explore, because it's already been hinted at. Randy's alcoholism is very apparent, and, it's kind of played off for laughs at his, it's played off as laughs when Randy's involved, but when Stan's involved, it's a little bit more dark, it's a little bit more cynical. So I think that kind of theme would be repeated, it'd be mirrored in Stan's own life. His alcoholism, it is, to the public, is presented, he's just the life of the party, but behind closed doors, incredibly destructive. Right.
So do you want to move on to Kyle?
Yeah, with as cynical as Stan is, we couldn't let our boy have an unhappy ending. So, these aren't, but it also would be unrealistic to make everybody have a perfect life, because they are far from perfect. And that's the same with Kyle. I'm going to start off with my headcanons, because Kyle's my favorite, and I have a lot of things that are very specific. And, of course, I'm probably going to be the odd one out, because I had a lot of my older headcanons that I still really like to this day, include him with Bebe. But it can really be replaced with any figure, if you want to. But for me, Kyle is, incredibly gifted in school. He's not necessarily the most popular person, but, he's on the basketball team. He's very successful in class, because his main goal is to get as far away from South Park as possible. At this point, he's so fed up with everything that goes wrong. This place breeds negativity, so his end goal is to get a scholarship and go to an Ivy League school far away from South Park. So after his falling out with Stan that I had mentioned previously, Kyle just kind of buries himself in his work, doesn't really date. He and Bebe have a fling, and he dates other girls for a while, but they ultimately break up before college. And so Kyle gets a scholarship, and he goes off to an Ivy League school. And at first, he wants to get into law school, but he kind of realizes his heart's really not in it, and he falls in love with more of the reporting side of criminal justice and everything. So he becomes an investigative reporter and a journalist. So he graduates with his degree, and he starts off pretty successful. He's not making a lot of money, but he is happy with what he does. It's an outlet for him to talk about what he finds problematic. It's a perfect place for him to vent. And he also, on the side, creates a podcast. I wonder where I got that idea. Creates a podcast talk show, where he talks about certain social issues and his opinions on them. And that has a nice little following. It gets him a little bit of money on the side. and he reconnects with his old girlfriend, Bebe. They date for a long time, and when Kyle proposes, they find out that Bebe is pregnant. So they have this whole scheme to try and hide it from his parents. And I had like a cute little fan fiction written for that, but that will never see the light of day because I don't like my writing anymore. But they marry, and they have 2 sons biologically, but Kyle has a really important drive to adopt because of his brother Ike. So they adopt a 3rd son from Canada. And they all really, really well until Kyle gets a call from Stan not too long after. I mean, it would be before children are born. But he ends up sponsoring Stan's recovery. They reconnect, and Kyle actually is drawn back to South Park in a lot of ways. He doesn't live there anymore, but he is drawn back a couple of times to really investigate South Park. There are so many things that he wants to know about this place that he grew up. So in returning to South Park, it actually kind of helps his career a little bit. But I see him as being a very, very dedicated father. He's almost helicopter parent level to his son, but not in a negative way. He just wants to be incredibly involved in their lives in ways that his own parents weren't really necessarily. He gets a lot of inspiration from his mother, though. His mother, he wants to be as nurturing as she is, but finds himself being almost overbearing like she is, so he's a little bit taken back, but he's incredibly involved with his kids, and he ends up becoming friends again with Stan, and he's slowly drawn back to South Park, not to live there, but just to still have that kind of emotional tie to South Park. That's what I envision for Kyle.
Alrighty, so before I start talking about Kyle, Sheila, not Sheila, your name is Shirley, sorry.
Yeah. I'm worried I said Sheila's name wrong anyway, so now
Anyway, Shirley and I have very different ideas about who Kyle ends up with, and I know that you hate mine, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit.
I know, but everybody else, like, I understand, and my headcanon can be replaced with literally any other person, but in my heart, I'm still kind of Kyle and Bebe trash, because I like 2 curly-haired people being together and making curly-haired babies.
Okay, alright, I'm going to read mine. Kyle hits his academic stride in middle and high school, where he starts taking advanced classes and he runs in different circles than his elementary school friends. He and Stan drift apart, but become friends again later in life. Kyle competes with Wendy for the role of valedictorian, and he narrowly beats her. In high school, Kyle begins dating Lisa Berger, and later marries her after he graduates from Northwestern with a degree in journalism. Now, let me explain why Lisa is a perfect fit for Kyle. For one, she's totally his type. She's nice, smart, and her looks are unconventional, much like Rebecca, his first love interest in the show. From what we know about Lisa, she's a sweet girl who longs for affection and attention from her peers, but can sometimes give in to her ego. So does that sound a little bit familiar? I like the idea of Stan and Kyle marrying female versions of each other. I think that's very funny. So Kyle loves Lisa very much, and she's the only girl he's seriously dated. Secretly, though, he kind of hates that he's fallen into the South Park cliche of marrying your high school sweetheart. He and Lisa adopt 2 kids together, a boy and a girl, since Kyle had such positive experiences with adoption as a child. Speaking of Ike, Kyle continues to be an overbearing older brother to Ike for their whole lives, which Ike secretly appreciates because he's a genius but also a hot mess. I think that Kyle loved living in Chicago during his time at Northwestern, and he and Lisa traveled for work in investigative journalism for a while. However, when they start a family, they settle in New York because Kyle is definitely a city boy. Kyle is popular and generally well-liked throughout his adulthood, but never has any close friends like Stan, which is why it's a relief to him when they reconnect. Kyle eventually dies in his 70s, which is old but also not, probably from a spike in blood pressure after one of his Sheila-like blowouts.
I couldn't bring myself to write about their deaths, because it would just make me too sad. But no, I don't really hate his idea with Lisa Berger because I really liked your reasoning behind it. I really liked the idea. The reason why I like the idea of Kyle and Bebe is not because of Bebe's portrayal in the show necessarily, because she is kind of one-dimensional, as are many other characters in the show, but I love what the fandom has created for Bebe. You know, a lot of people kind of headcanon that she's labeled often as the school slut, or, you know, the typical, like, bossy bitch in high school, but in reality, you know, she's just somebody who doesn't maybe have like the best home life, is friends with a lot of people who are kind of outcasts, but is ultimately a really sweet person. I would love to do a Bebe headcanon episode in the future because I think she's super awesome. I like what the fandom has created from her, and I love the idea of Kyle almost dating actually somewhat of his opposite. Not quite. They're opposites in ways that are complementary, and then they're really similar. You know, things don't really get under her skin a lot, whereas Kyle is constantly blowing up over things, so she would kind of be his calming rock to kind of keep him from exploding. But I'd have to talk more about her in another episode, because I like what we've created from her, from somebody who doesn't have too much source material.
Yeah, this isn't the Bebe episode.
Not yet, it isn't. But no, Kyle is someone, and you know, I didn't want Kyle to just experience success and, you know, not feel like he earns it. So I think there are a lot of Kyle's struggles come with his love-hate relationship with South Park, where the other boys are totally fine being with South Park. Kyle kind of resents it a little bit. He's angry because it's a place that breeds, you know, misconduct, but also has potential in certain ways. So, and it's still a place where a lot of his loved ones are. So he has to constantly battle his hatred for, like, the atmosphere of South Park and, like, the people he genuinely cares about. And I think, you know, he's just like, am I South Park trash? You know, I've worked so hard to be this person that's successful and, you know, completely detached from the redneck gung-ho South Park, but I'm still drawn to it somehow. So I think that's where his primary struggles are. Of course, he would still be friends with Stan until the very end. Even with all their ups and downs, I think they'd be major, like, rocks in each other's lives.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
You ready to get into Cartman? Ours is kind of similar for this one, but I think I think there are some details that are really different between ours for Cartman.
Yeah, my Cartman one is definitely the shortest one, so I'll just read it real quick. Alright, Cartman scams his way into South Park Community College and gets a business degree. He has a series of unhealthy relationships with women, which only escalate as he becomes rich and successful. He is still dependent on his mother for almost everything, even as an adult, and he's actually devastated when she dies. Cartman is a great businessman because of his charm and ability to manipulate others. He wreaks havoc on the world, but after elementary school, never has close friends again.
Wow, that was incredibly short. I feel like I'm going to sound like a Cartman fangirl after this, because I actually had a lot of fun writing Cartmans, because, you know, with Stan and Kyle and Kenny, I love them as characters, and I appreciate Cartman as a character, but he's far from my favorite. So I actually kind of had to brainstorm a lot with what I thought for Cartman. And a lot of the times you'll hear this in previous episodes of ours. I kind of struggle with, do I want him to be incredibly successful, or do I want him to be a loser in his mom's basement for the rest of his life? You know, it could be either one, because he's incompetent, but as a mature adult, but incredibly conniving and smart in the most manipulative of ways. So it really could be one way or another. And I decided to have my cake and eat it too, with my lovely little loophole for Cartman. So Cartman, I agree, totally scams his way into a community college and gets a business degree. You know, just plain business. He doesn't really want to do his own work. He is smart and he's capable of doing the work, but he doesn't. And he pays people to do his work for him. So he graduates actually with a very high GPA, one that he didn't earn. And upon his degree, he still lives with his mom and expects her to pay for everything and take care of him because it's my mom. You signed up for this. Like, why wouldn't you take care of me for the rest of my life just because? But she urges him to get a job so he can get money. And he also wants power and control. He's just like, well, obviously they're going to want me because of my degree and everything. So he finds out, though, because of his past and his antics in his childhood, like murder and wanting to start a genocide against Jews, nobody actually really wants to hire him. And he is baffled that nobody actually wants to hire him in the real world. It kind of kicks him in his ass. And he gets really frustrated, but lo and behold, he actually develops lives in his mom's basement, but develops a social media-esque website that becomes extremely popular. And he's actually, almost uncharacteristically, is totally anonymous about this. He's very anonymous with his website's success because he doesn't want to have to move out of his mom's basement. And he also wants to continue to collect unemployment checks. So he makes all of this money from his website under the table while also getting unemployment and living off of his mom. So he's floating in this secretive money while running this underground empire of a website. So yes, he's a success, but he doesn't want anybody to actually know about it. And, he gets in trouble with the law a couple times, gets into his regular antics, and kind of takes his mother for granted for a long time. She's disappointed, but at the same time, whenever he was gone, she was almost kind of devastated, and he misses, doting on him all the time. So they actually have a continued babying relationship, not just at her expense, but because, that's what you're used to. Stick with what you're used to, I guess. And when she passes away, he's incredibly devastated, but kind of goes insane after a while and shuts himself off. The website goes completely dormant, and then it's Kyle who actually investigates who is behind this website and is shocked to find out that it was Cartman all along. Cartman is eventually arrested because of tax fraud. And he's actually super fucking thrilled about living in prison. Like, he continues to run empires, whichever prison he's in. So he commits petty crimes just to be arrested again and to be thrown in jail for the rest of his life. So yeah, that's my tale of Cartman.
I kind of fucking love that ending.
Oh, and the thing is, Kyle is always a hand at putting him away. And Cartman does this cat and mouse for the rest of his life. Which I have a feeling that he kind of dies a little bit young because of his health.
Yeah.
I have a feeling like he would just kind of have a heart attack and not even fucking realize it and just die out on the floor. But after getting in and out of prison for so long, he basically baits Kyle into getting him arrested because he wants to keep getting arrested so he can live this lavish life in prison and not have to cook his own meal and do everything himself.
Yeah,
so,
and I feel like he would totally relish in the fact that, like Kyle is probably pissed that, like, when he's putting Cartman in jail, like, that's what Cartman wants.
Exactly. And there are these petty crimes, and he just constantly baits Kyle with his journalism. And his journalistic integrity always has him, doing what's right and putting Cartman in jail. Kyle always knows, like, God damn it, this is what he fucking wants me to do. So, Cartman, I would see, dies maybe, like, in his 60s because of his poor health. Still has a fuck ton of money, though, when he dies, but he just hoards it. He doesn't really spend it. He could use it to get out of jail. He just doesn't.
So do you want to talk about Kenny now?
Yeah, I think we could. I had a lot of fun writing about Cartman, so he was actually, because I had known so much about what I wanted to write for Kyle and Kenny and Stan for so long, it was a lot of fun planning a future for Cartman because I had never done it before. But Kenny, I also did a bit of brainstorming because I kind of had to add on to what I had his future as, so structured as. So Kenny continues, high school, and once he eventually drops out and does odd jobs alongside, so he can eventually afford his own place. He gets a rinky-dink kind of place, kind of on the outskirts of South Park, not in the best area, but coming from where he was, it's an improvement. And he moves out at 18. He saves up all this money working odd jobs after dropping out of school, and gets this place. And the second he turns 18, he has Karen move in with him because she's technically, she's underage, so she's living with her parents, but he applies to be her guardian, and of course, he has her live with him, and he actually he goes dormant as Mysterion for a while, a period in high school where he's just constantly working, and it's when Karen actually, ends up in trouble one night where he decides to once again don the Mysterion costume and everything and continue his life as a vigilante, and he realizes that's kind of his calling. He thought at one point that he needed to raise enough money to get him and Karen out of South Park, but he realized he's South Park kind of needs me a little bit. Why run away from this mess when I can hopefully actively change it? So he continues his life as Mysterion and actually finds a very successful career in the daytime as a cam girl. He essentially works as a sex worker online and very much enjoys it, and gets a lot of money that way. He'll still do odd jobs here and there, but he helps put Karen through school, and helps her go through college at the local community college, and she actually becomes pretty successful. I may go into depth on Karen in another episode, but Kenny continues to work as a vigilante. He's a cam girl by day and a heroic vigilante by night. Because I love Mysterion so much, and I think South Park kind of needs Mysterion. As for romance, Kenny, with his lifestyle, has a couple of flings. He is the most pansexual person in the world, so he dates everybody. But his longest and closest relationship is with Butters. Butters also stays in South Park. He's one of the few that actually does stay in South Park for an extended period of time. So they have a long relationship, and it's romantic for a while. But both of them kind of have this understanding that with their lives, it's something that's not permanent. But they continue to be solid foundations in each other's lives, even if it's not romantic. So yeah, Kenny never really does settle down. He doesn't have any children, and he actually opts to get a vasectomy because he's terrified of passing down his curse onto another person. So yeah, that's Kenny's life. He invests a lot of his energy into Karen and into trying to make South Park a better place.
All right, hold on. My thing for Kenny is very similar, but let me pull it up. Okay. All right, Kenny became close to Stan in their adolescence, and this friendship blossomed later in life when Stan returned to South Park, where Kenny lives his whole life. In high school, Kenny was interested in theater, particularly musicals, which is where he became close with Bebe and Tweek. Bebe was the first person to believe him about his frequent deaths, and in turn, she revealed to him a scary moment from her own childhood. To give you a hint, it's when her boobs were plotting to destroy the town. Kenny and Bebe have a sexual relationship that impacts their friendship during their early 20s, so they decide eventually to just be friends. Kenny doesn't go to college like his friends. Instead, he works in construction and always has work because South Park is constantly being destroyed. He saves all the money he earns so he can put Karen through college. He stays in South Park his whole life, and he is committed to keeping it safe. He investigates his background in order to better understand his powers. In his personal life, Kenny frequently dates women, mostly grown-up raisins girls, but the relationships never turn serious because he doesn't want to pass on his curse to a child. Kenny continues operating as Mysterion at night until his 50s, when he dies for the final time after his mother's death.
Damn, I didn't even think about his mom dying. Damn. That's wild. I couldn't bring myself to have Kenny die for real, so,
It's kind of interesting because Kenny, actually, of the four of them, I believe he dies he's the first one to die. But it's kind of like a happy ending for Kenny, because he's like, thank God.
I think, going off of that, I think his mom actually doesn't die of, like, a drug overdose or sudden. Like, it's a progressional death, and Kenny knows, like, okay, well, this is kind of it. And I think his final death, when he knows that his mom is dead, is kind of like a relief for him. Not necessarily, like, by suicide, but he kind of knows he's dying, and it's a peaceful moment for him.
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
I love that idea. I think he probably would be the first to die. I mean, he's always been the first to die anyway, but yeah, it's all of ours kind of, as you could see, all of our headcanons kind of followed similar storylines, similar beats, similar age progressions. I don't know, my Cartman was a little bit wild, so I
loved it, though.
I loved my Cartman one. I was very, very proud of it, because I realized I really, I didn't want him to have the satisfaction of having so much control over people, but I knew that was very practical for him because of his manipulation tactics. So I'm like, let's make him a loser in his basement, but he can also be a successful loser in his mom's basement. So a lot of fun writing these. I've had a lot of these headcanons, especially for Kyle and Stan, forever, ever since I kind of joined the fandom. And it's funny because a lot of similar themes and tropes appear, even in people who don't, like, ship the same things or enjoy the same sort of fandom content. Like, there are certain tropes that persist with these characters. So,
right, like,
I'd love to hear what other people's headcanons are for these four.
Yeah, leave them down in the comments and let us know what characters you'd like us to talk about next, possibly.
Yeah, I really like this format of doing them in fours, so maybe we can narrow down the next four to talk about, because I have a lot of them. I have headcanons for just about every single character. Some of them are more in-depth than others, as you could see, but yeah, I really enjoyed talking about these. I have a lot of fun, especially, I think a lot of times we get questions from our viewers, like Q&As are what sparks our discussion on the future of these characters. So major thanks to you guys for sending in those questions. I know we've got a bunch that we actually need to answer pretty soon. We may have a Q&A video again coming up pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think I have it scheduled for like a couple months from now, but if you guys keep sending in questions, you may bully us.
We might have to do another one just to
do it sooner, yeah.
But I had a lot of fun talking about these ones. I'd love to know what your theories are for these characters, if you think ours are garbage or not. But yeah, definitely give us some more ideas. Tell me about your ideas in the future, because it's a lot of fun. It's, even though Rachel and I, have differences in our own headcanons, it was so fun getting to discuss these before we started recording, and just being like, oh my gosh, that's such a cool idea, I gotta hijack that, or I absolutely love this idea, that's so in character. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. I know this was kind of a different video than what we normally do, but I had a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, and let us know if you'd like us to create more. If you want to, we will, but if you hate it, we probably will still make more anyway.
We'll probably still make more, and people just won't watch it, but that's okay, because we had a lot of fun making these. So yeah, thank you guys for listening and watching, and we'll figuratively see you next time.
Yeah, guys, thanks for hanging out. Leave us some comments, and have a great day. Bye.
Bye.